Hi, my friend, and welcome to the Good Girl Syndrome show. If you do not know me, my name is Julie Vander Meulen or Julie Vander Meulen, depending on where you are in the world and how you decide to pronounce my name. Today, I'm going to do the Sunday version of the conversation we had with Maria on Wednesday. So, on Wednesday, if you remember, we had the lovely Maria who was talking about her need to feel understood, right? And to feel seen and loved, right? And our whole discussion was around, at least her question, how she framed it, was around, is it me who has this deep urge to feel understood and seen? Like I have this focus in life, or is it that the people around me are constantly criticizing me and they're not seeing me for who I am and what do I do about that? I'm summarizing it, but that was basically what we were talking about. And so today, what I'm going to do is take the same topic of feeling misunderstood and just go over what that has looked like in my life, how that used to govern my whole life, actually. So it's kind of sad. Where I am now and the process in between, because as I was jotting down a few notes on like what was really going on for me, I realized that there were at least four different phases in this process of going from someone who constantly needed to feel understood and seen to where I am now, where sometimes I care, but most of the time I do not care what people think about me. I just do my own thing and I expect people to not understand me most of the time, right? And I don't feel like this is what should guide my life. So if you're interested in that, keep watching. I'm gonna just riff on the, whatever process has come to me in this specific area. So actually, before we start, my friend, if you want to show me some love, if you're enjoying these episodes, and if you like this topic, please do whatever feels right to you. Either put a thumbs up to this video, put a comment, subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed, or share it with a friend. Whatever feels right to you, whatever way you want to show me some love or write to me, whatever you feel like doing. Any encouragement is very, very welcome. Let's go first through how I used to feel. So I used to be someone who was constantly looking for external validation. So I had no sense of self-worth. Confidence was not something that was part of my vocabulary. But until I was, I'm now 34, right? Until I would say I was 26 to 27, none of these topics were even things I was interested in or even knew about, if you see what I mean. I didn't realize, like, I just thought that there were things that were wrong with me, right? But I didn't realize that, it was a sort of self-blame type of internal discussion going on inside of me. But I didn't know, one, that there was nothing wrong with me, but also two, that, if there was anything wrong with the way that I was thinking, was that, I did not acknowledge that I had any worth. I did not see that. I did not understand that. And I didn't understand that from that lack of self-worth and self-awareness and all these different things, that I was misinterpreting everything, pretty much everything about my reality and about my life. And, it was guiding my thoughts, but it was also therefore guiding my choices and my actions. So I was feeling pretty miserable. One of the ways that I was feeling miserable is that I constantly felt misunderstood by everyone around me. I always felt different. I had a deep, deep need to belong, right? And somehow was never able to. And so it started in multiple ways for me. So when, for example, I can give you a few examples. I remember, so I'm half Belgian, half Greek. I lived, my life in Belgium, but then I would spend the 2, 3 months of summer in Greece, right? And so in each place, I had friends, right? And so with my friends in Greece, I felt different. Because when I was in Greece, I felt like I was the Belgian kid. I couldn't speak Greek good enough. I couldn't do all these different things. I was also going to a village, right? And I was a city girl. Or even though that's how I portrayed myself, right? Just to show you what I was focusing on. My family had a beautiful, beautiful house in the countryside. So I was technically from the countryside, but I was going to school in a city. And so, but when I was going to Greece, I was in this little village, right? And they had their own codes, their own knowledge, right, about agriculture, all these different things that I was not very well aware of, especially not in Greek, right? I didn't know how to say a plum. I didn't know how to say an apricot, like silly things, right? But to me at the time, they were very, very important. And they were all signals to me that it did not belong. And so that created in me a deep, deep, deep desire to do whatever it takes whenever I was with someone, whatever it took to belong. And so I would learn every code. So if I went to quite a fancy school, I went to a European school, which was not exactly, how can I say, the social class that I was originally coming from. And so there were codes there. So I learned these codes so that I could blend in, right? My grandma, my Greek grandma, used to live in social housings, different social class again, right? Very different backgrounds, very different experiences that I was living at the same time in my life, right? And so I was learning the codes from that type of background, right? Different ways of being, different ways of speaking, right? At home, it was different. In my home, I had three couples of grandparents. So I had each of them was different, right? One was working class, Belgian working class, right? One was Belgium upper middle class, right? A bit intellectuals. And one was Greek working class slash business type of people. So different codes and everything. And I became a very, how can I say, a very flexible person, someone who could be in any environment and completely blend in. Like in a second, I could understand that that applied to groups and to communities, but it also applied to people. So whenever I had someone in front of me, I could see all the ways that we had something in common. I still do that today. I think now it's a skill, right? It's a way to build rapport instantly. I don't do it on purpose. It's just that's what I see. My bias is towards seeing what I have in common with anyone. So, which is a very, very beautiful thing because then you can connect very easily. You know, you can have a very warm type of relationship very easily if you focus on these things, right? However, even though on the outside, that's how I was performing, on the inside, what I was noticing. So that was a way for me to be a sort of chameleon, right? I was trying to blend in appearances, right? And so people felt very close to me. So I could belong. However, inside myself, it's not how I felt at all. Inside myself, I felt like people never really saw me. Why? Because I was always performing. I was always a different person. I remember going to therapy when I was perhaps 26, 27, that same age I was talking about earlier. And I remember one time when I was like, we were regressing, we were going to my past and seeing, we were doing timeline, a sort of timeline where we were looking at events that happened throughout my life from when I was just born to the age that I was then. And one of the reflections that I had early on was, it feels like I have been 25 different people in my life. And so part of the beginning of my journey was to understand, who am I? Like, I don't know who I am. Like, always am a different person when I'm with someone else, right? Who am I really when I'm on my own? And it so happened that at that time I had moved out of my family home, right? And so I was learning who I was on my own. And so the sensation that I had inside of me was that I constantly felt misunderstood. I constantly felt like people did not see me, they did not understand me. And I did not realize at the time that that was a form of loneliness, but that was really because my way of feeling loneliness is I don't feel lonely. I don't feel like I want people to come close to me. I have a tendency to isolate. I self-isolate as a coping mechanism. And so I didn't realize that you can isolate and still feel lonely. Like, you can crave to be, away from people and still feel lonely just because in a way you're not with the right people or like you don't feel safe around people, right? So that was kind of my, a little short recap on how I used to feel and how the sensation of feeling misunderstood was happening. So I was very good at performing, right? Without even realizing that that's what I was doing. It was just a safety, a survival type of mechanism. But then inside, I felt quite lonely. I felt like no one understood me. I often questioned the meaning of life, dark, dark space to be. And so then what that created in me with the people who were closest to me, namely my family, my partner, at work, right? If I had someone who was above me specifically, was that if I was being questioned in any way, whether it was a healthy type of questioning or not, I could not make the difference. And I always felt like it was an attack, and I felt like I was completely misunderstood. And as a result, then my default was to be a defensive type of person. And people would tell me that, like, you're being defensive. And I was like, I'm not being defensive. Like, this, I'm not being defensive. No, like, it's just the way that I constantly behave because I constantly had the impression that people were out there to get me. No? Makes sense with what I was saying before that I love to self isolate, right? So if you're always seeing the world as something scary and where you're always being questioned, going back to Maria's episode from Wednesday, right, where she also asked, like, I feel like I'm always being like like my choices, I think is what she said, are always being questioned. That's how I felt all the time, and so you can understand that then, I was constantly trying to prove something. I was constantly trying to prove that I was worthy. I was trying to prove that, I was worthy of being there. I was constantly trying to be the best. Like it created all sorts of patterns where at the same time I was rewarded for them because I was very, very good at anything that I did because it was impossible for me not to be because I hated criticism. I could not bear that because I had no sense of self-worth, right? And at the same time, it made me very difficult to be around, which I did not realize. I thought other people were being difficult, but with time, now I can see that perhaps some of them were difficult too, but I was very difficult as well because I could never be just relaxed and receive information. I always had to interpret it as like, is this a praise or is this a criticism, right? If it's a praise, I'll brush it off, right? Doesn't matter. I need to still be better. If it's a criticism, then I need to work in some way and do things better. I need to explain, how good what I did is actually is, like so that I can receive the praise, which I would dismiss anyway. So in what that means is I could never win, but also the people in front of me, they could never win either with me, right? And so basically, what that means is I was always trying to earn love. Like what I really wanted was love, right? I wanted a safe type of love, right? But then, because of my way of being, instead of just receiving love, that was not something I could do. So I was always trying to earn love. And so the environments and the people that I would always go towards were the people who were the most critical, right? Because I wanted to earn this love. So where do you go if you want to follow this pattern unconsciously? I always went to people who were questioning and who were, quite negative, right? I kept going towards that because I could not just receive love. And these people didn't want to just give me love. They wanted me to work for it. And if they ever gave me a scraps of love, then I would feel like, oh my God, this is the best moment of my life. So quite destructive patterns, as you can see. So that I would say was phase one, which lasted most of my life, right? The second phase was that I decided through therapy and reading a lot of personal development books, and then being coached as well, doing seminars. Like I started understanding myself and my patterns better and better. And I also started building myself. So I created, I'm not saying that this is the way you should go about it, right? But this is the way that I went about it. I created competence. And so I started becoming, if not an expert, I started becoming someone who was very competent in a workspace. And that gave me confidence. And from there, I derived a sense of self-worth. I knew that I was worth something in the marketplace. And so from there, the mix between gaining a little bit of confidence, understanding my own patterns, and seeing how things like how psychology works, right? These things together made me realize that this pursuit of earning love was pointless, right? That it was creating a lot of pain, right? And I stopped seeking for people to understand me as much. It was still very painful that people did not, right? So I was still in a lot of pain anytime that someone did not understand me, but I found another way to cope with it. I had actually two strategies. So I'll do phase 2 and 3, I think happen at the same time. One of the strategies that I developed that I still continue to have to this day is I am quite a silly and playful person. I love humor very, very much. If you've ever met me, you'll know that about me. I can be quite goofy and silly. And one of the ways that I made myself more approachable and I was able to belong and I was able to feel, how can I say, understood in the fact that people did not understand me, is that I started having a self-deprecating humor. And so I made jokes around how I was strange, I'm weird, I do these things, but like it's just me, like don't mind me, these types of things. So self-deprecating humor, again, I'm not saying that it was always, it was a way of keeping myself small. And, it was, in a way, it was a continuation of the same patterns of a low self-worth, right? But at the same time, it gave me something that I didn't have before, which is it gave me this sense of belonging. It gave me a sensation that I could be me, weird little me, right? I could be me around other people, right? And that really, really helped. And that, for the first time in my life, I started feeling really loved. And then also, while I was doing that, I had very beautiful people around me who could also see through that and who would tell me, Julie, like, stop being self-deprecating. Like, you're amazing. Like, you don't have to do that, right? And so slowly, slowly, I started surrounding myself with people who would tell me these beautiful things because that's what they saw. And they had no issue with me being great in different ways, right? Which was fantastic as well. So that is what I would call step number two. Then step number three, but it's happened in parallel to phase two, is that I started getting angry. So anger was something that I never allowed myself to feel before. I was very, very familiar with anything around sadness, depression, despair, grief, all these things. Very, very comfortable with them because it involved me, right? It involved me with me, low type of vibe, where I was questioning the world. Like that's what I knew. But then also, it did not create conflict with others, right? It was just me giving up on life or giving up on different areas of my life because I just thought, it's all doomed, right? Dark space to be in. But then the benefit of that was for someone who was very, very afraid of conflict. Because belonging, right? I wanted to belong. So, and I wanted to be loved and to earn love. So anger to me was the antithesis of being able to receive love in my own patterns. And so what I did in phase three is, thanks to therapy and to all the things, but specifically therapy, I realized that actually when I was feeling sad, I was actually really angry. And I was angry at myself very much. But I was also angry at specific people and at specific behavior. And so there's a part of me that became, quite aggressive actually. Like I became this type of feisty, girl who, like, you can't tell me anything type of vibe, right? And again, it wasn't very elegant when I was doing it. Sometimes, I was very defiant as a person, which is something that I've always had in me. I used to just do it in indirect ways, right? So I was always rebellious. So, for example, as a kid, I never did my homework, never did my homework. I never read the books. This is a silly example, but I think it portrays it really, really well. I loved literature. My first studies that I did in university, I studied languages and literature. So, love reading books, especially novels. At the time, that's what I loved. Yet, I've never, while I was in secondary school, I never once read a book that was assigned to me, like one of the novels that were assigned to me during the school year. I wouldn't read them. But then I would pack the 15 books or whatever, and I would take them to Greece in the summer in Greece, and I would read them all and devour them and adore them. So I had this type of resistant way to me. I still do. And but I wasn't expressing it. I was doing it in like sideways manners that wouldn't create conflict or not too much conflict. And so my phase three was then me realizing that, you know what, this behavior is not okay. So I'm not just gonna make fun of myself and, try to belong. Like I learned to create conflict and to be like, no, actually, no to this. Like I don't agree with you. You're not allowed to say that to me. Or like you hurt me, like, and start difficult conversations, which was an incredible phase for me because it meant that not only was I okay with being misunderstood, but I felt like I deserve, if I can say it like that. It's a bit entitled, but I think I really needed that at the time to say, I deserve to be understood. I deserve some consideration. I deserve to be shown some love and some respect, and so I started creating this assertive version of me. I would say a mix between assertive and aggressive because I wasn't very fluent in either of those, so I didn't know sometimes how to navigate it. And also, I did not measure how it came across, and also because I was not familiar with my anger, sometimes it wasn't anger, it was really rage, and I could not contain it. So it was spilling over, right? However, that phase to me was very, very healing because one, I could let out of all the yuck that was inside of me since I was very little. All of it came out, right? Also, I reconnected with my power because when you're angry, you're in your power, right? You're like in a power god type of thing. And so um while I was sometimes hurting people, sometimes I was not fair with people, sometimes I regretted what I said. It's like it gave me back my power. It gave me back my power and it gave me, um, you know, access to the full range of emotions that existed, which I did not allow before. So that was absolutely phenomenal. And so their being misunderstood sort of became like a badge of honor, right? Like I was being the brave one who no one understood, and I was going to fight and push through, that type of vibe. So that was phase three, and I'm sure there's many other phases, right? I'm simplifying it for the sake of saying this in 30 minutes. And then phase four, which is where I am now. It's at least that's what I believe is I'm pretty relaxed with being misunderstood. Like I don't. It's not actually, it's not even that I'm relaxed about being misunderstood. It's that I don't really care. Like, it's not one of my thoughts. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that I think about of like, what do they think? Do they understand what I'm saying? Do they, and the sensation behind it is it's completely irrelevant to me right now. Is I'm like, you know, and funnily enough, like, so if someone makes a fuss about something, I'm like, but why do you care? Like, I don't think I didn't ask you for your opinion or just like, okay, like you don't understand. Okay. And it's a little uncomfortable, but also a little, I think, surprising to people in the beginning, right? When you go from someone who's very angry, right, and aggressive and tries to like prove that they're right and that they're worthy and like all this energy to then being like, okay, like think what you think. People don't really know what to do with that because they're like, oh, like I thought this was going to be a fight. That people get used to this type of energy. And also, that's what fuels them, right? If they're the type of person who feels assertive or sometimes gets aggressive and, they think they have all the opinions, if you just like agree to disagree or you like say whatever you want, then it kind of diffuses the conflict out of things, right? And it also makes them think, okay, so I am entitled, them too. Like it gives them permission as well, which I had not understood before. It also gives the person in front of you permission to have their own thoughts and their own judgments and their own opinions, right? And they can feel safe as well. Because most probably, like I was saying to Maria, most people, right? I'm going to generalize here. Most people, I don't think, mm, impose things on us or criticize us or do these types of things because they want to hurt us. I think these, if I were to put it on a percentage, I would say it's 20% of times when people do something hurtful, perhaps even 10%. And the 80-90% of times is just people think they're doing something good. Like they genuinely think that like if they're overprotecting you or if they're being, telling you what your flaws are, or if they're being like pointing out everything that you haven't done well in your work, they think they're doing something good, either for you or for the situation, right? And so if you can give them, that was my realization. I didn't do it for that, but it was like kind of an afterthought afterwards that I was like, oh, okay. So that's what it creates for them as well. They feel safe speaking to me because they can tell me how they feel about things. I may not like it. And then I'm like, I mean, I see what you mean. Like, I understand. You see? So it's like it became more, and it is this now because sometimes I need to consciously do it because I still have the anger, right? That comes up from time to time when someone comes inside my limits. That I'm thinking, Julie, like, remember, like, you don't need to fight on this. Like, if they push too much, of course I can fight back. But before I do that, like, try to understand what's going on with them right now, right? And so, for example, if it's a member of my family, and I'm quite an adventurer and a risk taker nowadays. So you can imagine that for my family who loves me and wants me to be safe, that's quite of an issue, right? So they're trying to be supportive, but at times they don't understand. Many times they don't understand what I'm doing with my business, with my decisions, and so on and so forth. And they're afraid because I'm going on a path that they do not know. And so sometimes when they give me feedback, it's the wrong feedback for me. That's very clear to me. And at the same time, I can understand where they're coming from, right? And so that's what I say. I can say, you know what, like, I see where you're coming from. Like, I get why you're saying that. Like, that's it. And most of the time, it diffuses the whole thing. I feel love for them. And I'm grateful, actually, for not for the feedback itself, but because now I can understand, see that behind it is their care for me, is how they care for me, right? And it's okay. It's allowed. You know, they're allowed to be imperfect as well. And if they encroach my thing, you know, my values or things, I can be like, but this is your value, not mine, right? Or like, this is your path, and I do not want to be on your path, right? Um, and so, what I would end with here is, I think the sentence that helps me most in these times is one: seek to understand. I heard that from Tony Robbins. Seek rather to understand than to be understood, and that changes your life. Because when you seek to be understood, everything is about you. Without realizing it, we become very self-focused, and that creates issues, right? Whereas when I try to understand the other person in front of me, instead of making it about me, I'm trying to see, I'm leaning into curiosity. What is this really about? Why is this person saying this to me? It's not always easy, and perhaps you're allowed to be imperfect too. Perhaps sometimes you just want to say, "Hey, back off," no, and that's allowed too. But I find that, as in general, 80-90% of the time, I can very much do the, what's this about? Like, why is this person doing this? And my internal belief is, I'm under no obligation to make sense to you. I don't have to make sense to you, right? And this to me gives me plenty, plenty, plenty of freedom. And it gives me safety, because then I know inside myself that I only need to make sense to me. I'm the only one who needs to think that what I'm doing is worth my time. You know what I mean? So from that moment onward, once I figure that out, that I only need to make sense to me and I don't need to make sense to you, then what that also means, right, except for the freedom and the peace that it gives me, is you don't need to make sense to me either. So when someone in my environment says something, then I'm like, but this makes no sense, because you're coming at it from different values. Like, why are you saying this feedback? I could be angry. But other times I can just be like, they don't need to make sense to me. Like, they can just have their own values and their own thoughts, right? Number one. And number two, right, if it's a two-step process, number one is, you don't need to make sense to me and I don't need to make sense to you. And number two would be, um, uh, yeah, it's just from that place of like, no one needs to make sense to anyone. It's like, then what is behind it? What is this really about? Why is this person doing that? And how can I understand where they're coming from? Right. And perhaps then if I ever, perhaps that's step three, if I ever feel like I need or want to explain myself after all that, it's to say, if you wanted to understand me, if you wanted to understand me, I think this is the part that you're missing in your reasoning, right? That I'm focusing on this and I really want this, right? Doesn't have to make sense to you, right? But it makes sense to me and it's important to me, right? And I think that this type of process changes everything. At least it's changed everything for me. So that was it for today. I hope this was helpful for you. I'm very curious to see, what comes up for you when you listen to me and these different things. So if you're in my community already, do send me a message, because I love receiving them. I love receiving the feedbacks on like how the things that I've written in the newsletter or on YouTube, wherever, or on LinkedIn, how they've impacted you. And like, because you all see things a little differently from me. Even if it resonates with you, it resonates and creates new ideas for you that I would never have had on my own. So super curious about that. If you feel like giving me any type of feedback in the comments or writing to me or whatever it is. In any case, my friend, I wish you a beautiful, beautiful day. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye bye.